The golden grass of the Serengeti does not care for the fall of kings. To the wind, to the dust, and to the scorching sun, a lion is but a fleeting shadow upon the earth. But for those who lived through the reign of the one they called the Titan, his shadow was the only world they ever knew. Look closely at him now. He sits atop a weathered granite kopje, his silhouette etched against a blood-orange horizon. His mane, once a thick black shroud of defiance, is now matted with the gray of a dozen winters and the dust of 1,000 miles. His face is a roadmap of conflict, a deep notch in the right ear from a territorial dispute 5 years ago, a clouded eye from a cobra's strike, and scars that run like silver rivers across his powerful shoulders. He breathes heavily, each inhalation a conscious effort, a mechanical grind of old lungs against a weary ribcage. To the passing vulture, he is a meal waiting to happen. But to the wilderness, he is a legend in his twilight. This is the story of a final stand. Not a stand against a single enemy, but against the relentless, unforgiving march of time itself. To understand the weight of his current solitude, one must remember the thunder of his youth. There was a time, not so long ago, when this lion's roar did not just signal his presence, it commanded the very air to be still. When he spoke, the night held its breath. The hyenas, usually bold in their numerical superiority, would vanish into the shadows at the first vibration of his throat. He was the undisputed master of a kingdom that stretched further than a man could walk in 2 days. In those golden years, he was the personification of raw, unadulterated power. He moved with a terrifying grace, a 300-pound engine of muscle and instinct. He was the shield of the pride. Under his watch, the lionesses hunted with a confidence that only comes from knowing the most formidable fighter in the valley was guarding their flanks. He was the father of generations, a stern but vital protector who spent his afternoons enduring the playful pounces of cubs who would grow up in the security of his shadow. His reign was defined by a series of high-stakes gambles that he always seemed to win. Remember the great crossing of the Mara River, where he faced down a coalition of 4 nomadic males who sought to usurp his throne? He did not wait for them to reach his territory. He met them at the border, a lone sentinel of fury. That day, the river ran dark, and by sunset, the challengers were gone, either dead or driven into the wasteland, carrying the permanent mark of his claws. He did not rule through cruelty, but through an absolute, unshakable competence. He was the anchor of the ecosystem, the one who kept the balance, the one who ensured that life, in all its brutal beauty, could continue. But the wild is a jealous mistress. It grants power only to take it back with interest. In the height of his glory, the Titan seemed immortal, a fixed point in an ever-changing landscape. We watched him stand atop the highest ridges, his golden eyes surveying a realm where every living thing paid him tribute, if only through fear. The sun never seemed to set on his empire. The rains came and went, the migrations ebbed and flowed, but he remained, the constant, the king, the lion. Yet even then, in the peak of his strength, the seeds of his downfall were being sown. Every hunt, every fight, every cold night spent patrolling the perimeter was a withdrawal from a bank account that could not be refilled. The very strength that made him a god among beasts was slowly, invisibly, being eroded by the friction of existence. We are here to witness the final chapter, but to truly feel the tragedy of the fall, we must first bask in the warmth of his setting sun and acknowledge that for a brief, magnificent moment in history, the world belonged to him. Nature does not offer a retirement plan. In the wilderness, the transition from being the predator to becoming the vulnerable is a slow, agonizing realization. It begins in the joints. For the Titan, the morning ritual of rising from the earth has become a chore of willpower. Where once he would spring to his feet in a single fluid motion, he now pushes himself up with a grunt of effort, his stiffened limbs protesting the weight they have carried for over a decade. The fluid grace that once allowed him to stalk through chest-high grass without a single blade rustling has been replaced by a heavy, deliberate gait. He is still majestic, but the majesty is now tempered by a visible frailty. The first true sign of the end was not a fight he lost, but a hunt he could not finish. We watched as a herd of zebras moved across the plain, their stripes shimmering in the heat haze. In his prime, the Titan would have coordinated with the pride, or perhaps used his immense strength to tackle a stallion alone. But as he crouched in the shadows, his muscles lacked the explosive tension of his youth. When he finally made his move, the burst of speed was gone. The zebra he targeted saw the hesitation, the slight stumble in his stride, and vanished into a cloud of dust. He was left standing alone in the clearing, panting, his tongue lolling from his mouth, staring at a meal that had easily outpaced him. This is the quiet cruelty of time. A lion who cannot hunt is a lion who begins to starve. As the hunger sets in, the social fabric of the pride begins to fray. The lionesses, usually loyal to the death, are driven by the brutal pragmatism of survival. They have cubs to feed, and a leader who can no longer provide protection or assist in the kill becomes a shadow over their future. There is a subtle change in the way they look at him, no longer with the submissive reverence of the past, but with a wary, distant calculation. He feels the isolation growing. He spends more time on the periphery of the group, watching from a distance as the younger females and the few maturing subadults take the lead. He is becoming a ghost in his own home. But the most pressing threat comes from beyond the borders. The soundscape of the savannah is changing. At night, the air is no longer filled solely with the Titan's deep, resonant boom. Now, there are new voices. From the dark ridges to the north, the calls of two young nomadic brothers rise like a challenge. Their roars are sharp, energetic, and filled with the arrogance of youth. They are testing the boundaries, smelling the air, and sensing the weakness that wafts from the Titan's territory like wood smoke. They know the king is old. They can hear it in the way his voice cracks when he tries to answer them. The Titan tries to maintain the facade. He patrols the riverbed, marking the trees with scent and scratching the earth with his claws. But the gestures are hollow. His territory, once a fortress, now feels like a cage. Every sunset brings the threat closer. The nomads are no longer just voices in the distance. They are shadows moving along the tree line, watching him, waiting for the moment when his exhaustion outweighs his experience. He finds himself resting more frequently, choosing the dense thickets where he can hide his presence, rather than the high kopjes where he once stood for all to see. This is the twilight of a king, a period of haunting silence and growing shadows. The crown is still on his head, but it has become a heavy burden. He is navigating a world that is rapidly outgrowing him, where his scars are no longer badges of honor, but targets for those who wish to take everything he has left. The stage is being set for a final confrontation, as the old world and the new collide under the watchful eyes of 1,000 scavengers. The psychological weight of a dying empire is often heavier than the physical wounds that cause its collapse. For the Titan, the air itself has become thick with the scent of his own replacement. The nomadic brothers are no longer just ghosts in the distance. They have become a constant, suffocating presence on the fringes of his vision. They are practitioners of predatory patience, circling his territory like an invisible noose tightening around his throat. This is the period of the gathering storm, where the tension on the savannah becomes so palpable that even the smallest creatures, the francolins and the squirrels, seem to go silent when the Titan passes by. The first direct encounter happens under the shroud of a moonless night. It isn't the grand battle the scavengers are waiting for, but a calculated probe. As the Titan drinks from a shrinking pool of muddy water, the two nomads emerge from the darkness, flanking him. In his prime, he would have charged without hesitation. Now he stands his ground, his hackles raised, a low, guttural vibration beginning deep in his chest. It is a sound of ancient fury, a warning that even a broken sword can still draw blood. The brothers hesitate. They see the scars, they see the labored breathing, but they also see the sheer mass of a lion who has never known the meaning of retreat. For nearly an hour, they engage in a dance of psychological warfare. The nomads snarl and feint, testing his reflexes, while the Titan uses every ounce of his experience to position himself so that they cannot attack him from behind simultaneously. He uses the terrain, a fallen acacia tree and the steep bank of the river, to narrow their path. Eventually, the younger lions withdraw into the shadows, unwilling to risk a serious injury just yet. They have time on their side. He does not. This small victory, however, comes at a devastating cost. The adrenaline that fueled his defiance leaves him trembling and hollow. His heart hammers against his ribs like a trapped bird. Every muscle in his body aches with a dull, throbbing heat. The savannah is no longer his kingdom. It has become a gauntlet of survival. The watering holes he once controlled are now guarded by his enemies. And the herds he once followed have moved to greener pastures he no longer has the strength to reach. Isolation is the cruelest part of the storm. The pride is gone now, having moved on to follow the rain and the hope of a stronger protector. He is a king with no subjects, a general with no army. He wanders the dry riverbeds, his roar reduced to a rasping cough that barely carries across the wind. He spends hours staring into the distance, perhaps remembering the faces of the cubs he sired, or the heat of the pride huddling together against the winter chill. In these moments of profound loneliness, a choice presents itself, one that every aging predator must eventually face. He could leave. He could turn his back on the heart of his territory and wander into the vast, unclaimed wastes of the scrubland. There he might eke out a few more weeks or months of life, scavenging on the scraps left by others, dying slowly and quietly in some forgotten thicket. It would be a life of safety bought with the coin of his dignity. But the Titan was not born for a quiet end. The instinct that drove him to conquer still burns in the embers of his spirit. To leave would be to admit that he is already dead. As the nomads begin their nightly chorus again, closer this time, the old lion makes his decision. He stops his aimless wandering. He returns to the very center of his old realm, to the highest point of the plateau where his reign began. He will not be hunted like a coward in the brush. He will wait for them here, in the light, on the ground he bled for. The storm has finally arrived, and the king is ready to meet it. The air on the high plateau is thin and cold, carrying the scent of dry earth and the metallic tang of an approaching storm. There is no moon tonight, only a vast, indifferent canopy of stars that have witnessed the rise and fall of a million kings. The Titan stands alone. He does not hide. He does not crouch in the tall grass. He stands in the center of the clearing, his heavy head held high, his mane catching the faint starlight. He is waiting. He has ceased to be a hunter. He has become a monument. The nomads do not come with the grace of stalkers tonight. They come with the heavy, rhythmic thud of killers who know their target has nowhere left to run. They emerge from the darkness like twin shadows, their eyes reflecting the pale light with a predatory glint. They circle him, one moving to the left, the other to the right, a pincer movement designed to overwhelm. The silence of the savannah is absolute, broken only by the rasping breath of the old king and the soft crunch of gravel beneath the paws of the usurpers. The first strike is not a roar, but a sudden, violent explosion of movement. The younger of the two brothers lunges, a blur of muscle aimed at the Titan's flank, but age has not completely robbed the king of his reflexes. He pivots with a roar that seems to shake the very foundations of the earth, a sound not of fear, but of absolute defiance. He meets the challenger mid-air, his massive forepaws striking with the weight of a decade of experience. The nomad is sent sprawling back into the dust, surprised by the residual power in those old bones. But the reprieve is short-lived. As the first brother recovers, the second strikes from behind. Claws rake across the Titan's scarred back, drawing fresh blood that runs hot against his cold skin. He turns to face the new threat, but his movements are heavy, hampered by the stiffness in his hips and the exhaustion that has settled into his marrow. The battle becomes a chaotic symphony of snarls, the sound of teeth grinding against bone, and the heavy thud of bodies hitting the ground. It is a lopsided contest, a fight between the waning moon and the rising sun. The Titan fights with a desperate, calculated ferocity. He uses his weight to pin one down, using his remaining strength to protect his throat, but he cannot be everywhere at once. He is bitten, clawed, and dragged. Yet every time he is brought to his knees, he finds a way to stand again. There is a terrifying beauty in his resilience. He is a creature refusing to accept the expiration date written in his DNA. He isn't just fighting for territory anymore. He is fighting for the right to die as he lived, unconquered. As the minutes stretch into an hour, the physical world begins to blur for the old king. The pain in his limbs recedes, replaced by a strange, numb coldness. His vision narrows until all he can see are the golden eyes of his enemies. He is bleeding from a dozen wounds, his breathing a wet, ragged whistle. The nomads too bear the marks of his defiance. One limps heavily, the other has a torn ear and a deep gash across his chest. They have learned that even a dying king is a dangerous god. The end comes not with a single blow, but with the simple, crushing weight of reality. His legs, the pillars that have carried him across thousands of miles, finally give way. He collapses onto the dust of his own kingdom. The nomads close in, their shadows falling over him like a final curtain. He does not plead, he does not whimper. Even as the life begins to ebb away, he fixes his clouded gaze on the horizon. He has held his ground. He has fought his last stand. The silence returns to the plateau, heavier than before, as the stars continue their slow, silent crawl across the sky. The reign of the Titan is over, but the earth will remember the heat of his blood long after the wind has scattered his scent. The sun rises over the Serengeti with an indifferent brilliance, casting long golden fingers across the plateau as if the violence of the night had never occurred. The world does not stop for the fall of a king. The insects begin their rhythmic hum. The morning breeze stirs the acacia leaves, and the first vultures appear as tiny, circling specks against the pale blue sky. On the ground, the dust has already begun to settle over the place where the Titan made his final stand. The two nomads, now the new masters of this realm, stand over the remains of the old world. They are bloodied and weary, carrying the physical reminders of the old lion's last lesson: that power is never given, only taken, and never without a price. They will roar tonight, and their voices will claim the hills, the rivers, and the prides. They will father their own sons and defend these same borders with the same ferocity. They do not realize it yet, but they have simply stepped into a cycle that was spinning long before they were born and will continue long after they are gone. They are the new actors in an ancient play, wearing a crown that is destined to eventually become too heavy for them as well. But the story of the Titan does not end with his last breath. In the high grass of the southern plains, a young lioness lifts her head to the wind. Beside her, two small cubs tumble and play, their movements clumsy but full of a familiar inherited spark. They carry his amber eyes. They carry the strength of his spirit in their growing frames. The Titan is no longer a physical presence, but he is woven into the very DNA of the Savannah. His blood flows through the veins of the next generation, a silent legacy that ensures his reign was not in vain. Every time one of his descendants strikes down a gazelle or defends a territory, a part of the old king lives again. Nature is a master of recycling. Nothing is ever truly wasted. The flesh and bone that once commanded fear will return to the soil, nourishing the grass that feeds the herds. The energy that once fueled the most powerful predator in the valley will find its way back into the earth, completing the great unbroken circle. To some, this is a tragedy, a story of loss and the cruelty of aging. But to the wilderness, it is a triumph of continuity. The king has returned to the kingdom he spent his life protecting. As the heat of the day begins to shimmer over the horizon, the scavengers arrive to perform their grim but necessary duty. They are the cleanup crew of the gods, ensuring that the transition from one era to the next is absolute. By sunset, there will be little left to mark the spot where the Titan fell, save for the memory of his roar and the scars he left on his enemies. We look upon the empty plateau and realize that the last stand was not about winning a battle he knew he would lose. It was about the dignity of the struggle. It was about proving that even in the face of inevitable decline, a noble spirit remains unbroken until the very end. The Savannah is a place of harsh truths and brutal ends, but it is also a place of eternal beginnings. The shadows begin to lengthen once more, stretching across the plains like the ghosts of old kings. The wind carries the scent of rain and the promise of a new season. The era of the Titan is over, and the reign of the brothers has begun. But as the first stars appear, if you listen closely to the rustle of the grass and the distant rumble of the thunder, you can almost hear it. A low, phantom vibration in the air. A king may fall, his bones may turn to dust, and his name may be forgotten by the wind. But his roar echoes forever.